Let's bring in Jamil Jaffer now. He's the founder and executive director at the National Security Institute. He's a former associate White House counsel to President George W. Bush and former Justice Department counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for National Security. So, Jamil, no one's expecting the U.S. to get involved with everyone's internal affairs, but to step in and stand up against human rights violations and to protect women's rights. So how can the U.S. work from the inside to strongly support these tens of thousands of young people protesting, saying enough with this out-of-touch regime?
Well, it's a great question, Arthel. I mean, part of the challenge here is that we've seen 14,000 people in Iran arrested, nearly 300 killed, 50 minors killed in these protests already over the last 7 weeks. And the Biden administration response, which has been more robust than what the Obama administration did during the 2009 protests, has been to sanction a number of individuals and to make public statements. That simply isn't enough now, Arthel. We need to get in there. We need to be providing direct support to these protesters, both overtly and covertly, and really helping them overthrow this regime that has brutally been oppressing its people and creating chaos around the globe.
And so how do you do that?
Well, Arthel, there's a variety of ways. We have a history in the United States of going back and supporting protest movements and the like. We did it in Russia during the Cold War. We've done it around the globe. And look, I'll admit, it has been a checkered history at times of the U.S. supporting protest movements. But this is a situation where Iran is not just oppressing its own people. They're supporting the Russians that are attacking civilians in Ukraine. They're fomenting terror throughout the Middle East. This is a long-term problem. We've got to take action now and finally change the U.S. policy to say, look, we want regime change in Iran. We're going to seek it on the Iranian people are going to get it. We're going to help them do it.
And as you said earlier, money talks. This week, the Biden administration is expected to unveil more sanctions on Iran. Possibly targets, they're saying, are the mid-level Iranian police commanders who have abused the demonstrators. So what about freezing assets or loans from the World Bank for Iranian leadership individually or as a government? And perhaps any funds that are being funneled to Iran from other countries. I mean, is that possible? And can it stun and stunt the Iranian leadership?
Well, look, at some level, these sanctions are helpful. They're putting sanctions on individual officials. But what we really need to do if we're going to be effective against the regime is go back to the prior administration's policy of maximum pressure, putting significant second-party, third-party sanctions on Iran, preventing other countries from doing business with them. That's the most effective way to really affect the regime and affect their calculus. It brought them to the table earlier in the Obama administration when Congress imposed those sanctions to the table for the nuclear deal. It can bring them to the table on these protests. We've got to force their hand. And the administration simply isn't ready to push hard enough. They need to get more aggressive, and they need to do it now.
On that note, as long as Iran is in cahoots with doing business with Russia and China, is there still a point to a mediocre GCPOA, a nuclear deal with Iran? Is it still beneficial to the U.S. and allies?
Well, look, Arthel, I've long been a believer that the JCPOA was never a good deal, and trying to get back to it is a bad idea. And now even more so, with 14,000 people arrested, 300 people dead, women protesting on the streets, minors being killed. Now's the time to stop, this pretense that we can negotiate with the Iranians on stuff like this. They're not going to accede to our demands, and they're frankly not going to keep up with their end of the bargain. And so now's the time to throw the nuclear deal over and say, look, we're not talking to you again until you stop attacking your own people in the streets and stop supporting the Russians in Ukraine.
And meanwhile, listen, the estimated population of Iran is 86.7 million people. The average age of that population is 32. So with these throngs of young Iranians feeling like they have nothing to lose, could we be on the brink of a modern day, different version, 1979 revolution, a reversal in the name and memory of Mahsa Amini?
I think there's a real opportunity here. The young people in Iran are upset with their government. They see the brutality of their government. They don't want them in place. We can empower that effort. We can get them open internet, more access to information, more access to news, and resources to continue these protests and to do their own work, which is to take over their own government and establish a regime that's in their favor for themselves.
And again, how do you do that?
A lot of it is providing them capabilities and support. Our allies in the region have access to dissident groups in Iran. We may not have as good access, but they have access. So it takes both covert action, working through intelligence sources, but also overt action. We need to be more aggressive and, frankly, give more access to the Iranians. We've been talking about Starlink being provided to the Ukrainians and to the Iranian people. The U.S. government can do more to support that effort, as well as other methods of communication into Iran.
And finally and quickly here, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he wields all the power. We know this. He's 83 years old, and according to an article I read in the New York Times, he had surgery sometime early September for bowel obstruction after suffering extreme stomach pains and high fever. He was considered gravely ill. Considering this is not 1989, but it's 2022, what becomes of Iran after the Supreme Leader?
That's a great question, Arthur. I think part of the challenge is that we don't know. But I think if the Iranian people themselves rise up, we're likely to see a much more friendly regime to those people and to their ally and to the folks in the region.
Jamil, Jaffer, thank you. It's complicated, but we try to both rush through and be as concise and clear as possible. Thank you for your information, as always, and expertise. Thanks, Jamil. Take care. And we'll be right back.